Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Alexander S.E. Girvan, and I'm here to present our paper, Leveraging Lessons from the Caribbean to Enhance the Value Chain Approach in Developing Sustainable Small-Scale Capture Fisheries, alongside my co-authors, Melanie Andrews-Bacchus, Dr. Sharon D. Hutchinson, and Mr. Terrence Phillips. Just a quick overview of our presentation. I'm going to quickly go into what is participatory value chain analysis versus a regular value chain analysis. Some key considerations for participatory VCA in small-scale fisheries, including selection and some tips on conducting a VCA, and as well some lessons learned on how participatory VCA can help develop sustainable small-scale fisheries and contribute to important regional and global goals. Well, starting at the beginning, what is a value chain? Well, a fisheries value chain represents the full life cycle of a seafood product, starting from the use of inputs, fuels, boat gear, to final consumption, frying in a restaurant or grilling somewhere by the sea. It articulates the steps by which value is added by various actors along the chain and how the product moves from sea to final consumer. A fisher harvests it from the sea, creating some value there. A processor may loin or convert it into some other process, some other fish product type. And of course, a distributor or a final reseller is going to package that, move it somewhere else. So each of these people are adding value to this product. Now, a participatory value chain analysis is the examination of this entire value chain in deep collaboration with stakeholders to improve the socioeconomic conditions of all actors in that value chain, as well as its governance and environmental sustainability. Now, traditionally, a value chain analysis can have different goals of improving the value chain, but in our specific case, a participatory value chain analysis requires that deep participation and the equal the balance of the socioeconomic goals as well as the governance goals and sustainability goals are supposed to have equal importance. Of course, we are also advocating here for a gender-sensitive lens to always be applied throughout for it to be effective. Now, let me get into some key considerations for conducting a value chain analysis in small-scale fisheries. The first step you're going to have to do is, of course, select a value chain amongst many. And here in our paper, we're writing about our experience in the FAO Jeff Stewardfish project. With 8 product countries and over 20 value chains to consider. So we had to reduce that to a number of 3 value chains to conduct value chain analysis on. So what did we do? We developed some criteria for value chain prioritization in collaboration with project stakeholders. And these criteria included the scale of potential positive impact on target beneficiaries, in this case, small-scale fishers, the potential for end market development. Can a new market be created, or can an existing market be enhanced? The environmental sustainability of that value chain. Do we think it's going to get better or worse with a VC analysis? And of course, the level of private sector involvement beyond small-scale fishes, because we're talking about creating new markets and adding value. Now, while these criteria were specific to Stewardfish project, and we're not saying that there are criteria that have to be used all the time, in generating these criteria, you want to do that in collaboration with project stakeholders, but the general principle of promoting equity, particularly for small-scale fishers, and Pareto efficiency as VCA outcomes should be used when selecting these criteria. Now, Pareto efficiency fundamentally means that once you're conducting your VCA, if you're going to improve the position of one person, you're not making other people worse off. So this idea generally of trying to do as little harm as possible is a good principle there. We, of course, understand that that's not always the case. Sometimes because of environmental threats such as climate change, there is a risk that you'll conduct a value chain analysis, make some recommendations, and some people may be worse off. But this principle is one that we want people to hold near and dear when they're developing these criteria. Once we did these criteria, we had a long list of over 20 value chains, as I said, and we scored each of these versus the various criteria. A pair of experts scored these, so we had independent scores. And from this, we were able to prioritize and bring it down to 3 value chains: the mahi-mahi value chain in Barbados, spiny lobster in Jamaica, and queen conch in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So this is kind of how we narrowed it from 20 down to 3. Now, our experience here was conducted during the COVID-19 pandemic, which of course had severe limitations in terms of travel and face-to-face interaction, and this influenced our methods. Now, this was a challenge, but also we had significant learnings. We showed or demonstrated that it can be done, a value chain analysis and selection can be done remotely, and in this case with limited resources. But our caveat here is that it can only be done remotely and with limited resources if you seek out local participation in an active way and use hybrid approaches. Doing things only digitally or online is not enough. You actually also have to have people on the ground supporting your work. Now, as well, in selecting a value chain, we would like to advocate for people to consider project continuity and building on previous project work. The Stewardfish project looked at the Queen Conch value chain in St. Vincent and Grenadines, and another value chain analysis that we did later on, the UNCTAD Blue Biotrade value chain analysis, built on that. So really what we're saying here is that building on previous projects is a great way to conduct a participatory VCA and improve small-scale fishery value chain conditions. So once you've selected a value chain, how do you conduct it in a participatory way? So here we're articulating some key steps, broad brushstrokes. Of course, you modify it depending on the case, but you really want to start initially with a stakeholder mapping. Who is involved in the various steps to produce that seafood product? Where are they? What is the different power relations between them? And you'd really want to establish when there's main stakeholder types, groupings, and locations, which of course you can break down further. And while you're doing the stakeholder mapping, you're gathering information on stakeholders to eventually target them in some of these methods that we're mentioning later on, the focus groups and multi-stakeholder workshops. So building a stakeholder database is essential for continuity of this work. Don't just map the stakeholders, build a database so you can continue these relationships. After you map the stakeholders, you will of course have to map processes, understanding processing methods, product flows, and distribution. And this is really key for environmental sustainability, because when you begin to understand processing methods and product flows, you can better understand where there are losses and where waste can be maybe turned into value. Once you've done stakeholder mapping and process mapping, you're moving into the bulk of gathering information. And here we have 4 primary methods: key informant interviews, surveys, focus groups, and multi-stakeholder workshops. And you use these different methods at different stages of the value chain analysis. And here I put them actually in a sequential order for us. The key informant interviews can be used for the broadest set of stakeholders. Okay, you may not necessarily be doing a survey with all of the marine police, but you can do a key informant interview with the main marine police person who deals with, let's say, IUU fishing in that value chain. You can also maybe speak to somebody from the health ministry. You're not going to interview every single sanitary inspector, depending on your case, but you can generally begin to understand, some of the challenges and opportunities from those broad brushstrokes. From those key informant interviews, you then develop, of course, a survey or semi-structured interview, which you're going to gather a little bit more quantitative in addition to qualitative information. But that really is built on that key informant interview and that initial snapshot that you get. Once you've done your surveys, key informant interviews, you're going to have a decent idea of the challenges and opportunities that fishers face. And you want to use focus groups to explore those, to understand those challenges and opportunities from those who face them, not just from your perspective as a researcher. Finally, we have multi-stakeholder workshops, which are really important for this last point that I have on this slide, which is validating findings and recommendations, but really and truly building some sort of buy-in for the next steps, but as I'll mention later on, to navigate conflicts between people in the value chain. The final step is the validation of findings and recommendations. And what we're saying here is, without validation of these findings and recommendations, the great ideas you come up with would have, great ideas with little buy-in rarely have results. That's the point we're trying to make here. Now, ideally, you want to move towards a participatory plan of action, which is a case that happened in the Blue Biotrade project with the OECS, UNCTAD, and CITES, because you want everyone to be focused on getting the recommendations done, not acting in an individual way, but really acting together. When you're conducting value chain, of course, gender and environment are 2 essential considerations, as we mentioned earlier on. You want to consider gender throughout the process. Consider the roles of both men and women along the value chain. And every single time you're collecting data, make sure that your data is gender disaggregated. Of course, as well, value chain analysis is traditionally thought to be an economic tool. You want to look for invisible value addition, which unfortunately generally tends to happen, or unfortunately, it can be missed because it happens by women or by people who are basically on the margins of society. So you want to look for those invisible value additions as well. Now, you're considering gender throughout the process. Environment is the next step. Due to the multiple environmental threats that fisheries ecosystems face, climate change, overfishing, land-based source of pollutions, value chain analysis should aim to improve environmental conditions. It should not just be maintain a status quo and do no harm. You should be aiming to improve the environmental conditions within those fisheries. And there are lots of options for you to do so, creating value from waste, creating new value-added products. And as Dr. Clark said in our beginning presentation, how can we extract more value from the existing catch before thinking to increase harvest? So Some lesson learned and how we believe participatory VCA can help develop sustainable small-scale fisheries and contribute to regional and global goals. Well, the first thing that you've heard me stressing throughout this is that participation is not optional. It's really an important, or participatory VCA is an important tool for gathering stakeholder inputs, but really importantly, resolving conflicts and generating consensus. Going to a fisher and saying, hey, put ice on your boat. The fisher may say, well, I don't really see a noticeable difference in quality when I land my fish and ice it. It's just a couple of hours, it's not that big a deal. But when a fisher hears from somebody in the supermarket industry, hey, if you don't put your fish on ice immediately, that fish is going to bruise 5 times as fast, or I'm going to see twice as many losses, or my consumer is going to buy that fish defrosted and not be happy about the quality, and it's going to affect my bottom line. But it's a little bit easier for people to navigate those conflicts between actors when they realize that the entire chain is connected. And in a really great quote from Dr. Hutchinson, you cannot resuscitate a bad fisheries product. Once it's bad, it's bad. So this idea of participation helping us see win-win outcomes is truly makes participation not optional, essential. As well, participatory VCA, in our experience, can promote organizational partnerships. In the case of the Blue Biotrade Project, this was led by the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, which led on cooperation, the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, which led on trade aspects, and CITES, the body that regulates wildlife trade, dealing with sustainability aspects. And what we found is UNCTAD and CITES are both located in Geneva, but because of this project, they actually had improved organizational partnerships. What we're also trying to say here is that because VCA is not just about economics, it's about sustainability, it's about governance, it can really help bring partners together and to activate a plan of action or recommendations. It's not just the Ministry of Fisheries or Blue Economy. It requires a real suite of partners. As well, we're seeing here, participatory VCA can help inform policy. And the main thing here is that, blue economy development is extremely exciting for the region, but it's only exciting if it's equitable and it doesn't compromise long-term environmental health. So VCA as an approach, participatory VCA approach, can help inform policy to make sure the development of our blue economy is equitable and sustainable. Finally, participatory VCA can help advance multiple regional and global goals and initiatives. Participatory VCA, in our experience, has shown, hey, these are some import substitution opportunities that exist. I could be importing this fish from a CARICOM neighbor instead of importing it all the way from Vietnam. So this is actually an interesting way of showing how we can reduce the food import bill. Alternatively, if you're reducing waste or creating new products, okay, sure, you want to import fish fingers from, let's say the global north, somewhere else. Well, hey, maybe there's opportunity to create fish fingers locally from waste. So it's really an interesting way to see how we can reduce regional food import bill, but also increase interregional trade of seafood products. Value chain approaches have been included in the CNFO CRFM Small Scale Fisheries Action Plan. So we're also hearing from fishers that this is something that they want, but they only want this if they're in the room and it's truly participatory. Bringing in a consultant from outside the region to only speak to people, in a fancy workshop is simply not enough. You really have to get on the ground and speak to the fishers themselves when conducting VCA. And of course, SDG goal 14.7, which is about increasing the benefits derived from the marine environment by small scale, by SIDS, small island states. This is really a great approach as well to help promote this, because we can make sure that good fisheries products are coming in a sustainable and equitable way. So I think that's the end of my presentation. I would like to thank you all for giving us this format and really thank my co-authors, but particularly make a final point that we have incredible fish in the region, we have incredible fishers, but we also have incredible fisheries professionals. And we hope that these approaches can really bring all of these people even closer together and make sure that the next 20 years of Caribbean fisheries is sustainable and equitable and meaningful for all of us. So thank you very much. And again, I thank my co-authors, Director Hodden, and organizations of this conference.